Welcome, everyone. My name is Jade Smith. I'm an associate with For Purpose Law Group, and I would like to thank everyone for attending here. Nonprofits and Crypto Power Hour. I'm here with some other colleagues of mine at For Purpose Law Group who will be introducing themselves shortly throughout our presentation. But welcome. We also want to thank USD for partnering with us and doing this webinar. The USD School of Leadership and Education Sciences. And also we wanted to make sure that you are aware that all of the donations that you contributed will be going to the nonprofit leadership program for today's session. So with that, I will go ahead and get started with our agenda. So we will be covering a breakdown of cryptocurrency first, and then we're going to go into why a nonprofit should accept crypto, how can a nonprofit accept crypto, and then we'll be discussing crypto enforcement and litigation issues, and we'll make sure to leave time for question and answers at the end. So if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will make sure to go through them at the end, time permitting. As I had mentioned, my name is Jade Smith, and I am an associate with For Purpose Law Group. I will be covering the cryptocurrency breakdown portion of the presentation. So let's get started with what is crypto, right? Cryptocurrency is sometimes seen as a digital currency, but a lot of times it's just not talked about in the right way. It isn't a form of currency. It is decentralized, so unlike fiat currency that you're most used to with your dollars and coins, it's not backed by any government agency or any bank system. So it is completely decentralized and it's encrypted. It's a medium of exchange that's based on blockchain technology, which we'll be going into more details of what actually that means. So the very first form of cryptocurrency that was introduced was Bitcoin, which also happens to be the most popular as well. Currently, it's about 88% of all crypto donations is in the form of Bitcoin. But it was first introduced in 2008 in a white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, who described it as an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust. It's developed a little bit since then and taken on different shapes and forms. However, the most important part of that is the cryptographic proof part, which we'll be going into detail. So in order to have cryptographic proof, you have to have the transactions that exist on the blockchain be verified and recorded on a digital ledger, which is what we know as the blockchain. Let's talk a little bit more about cryptocurrency. Currently, there's about 18,000 different cryptocurrencies traded publicly. In terms of federal agencies, the Securities Exchange Commission has termed specifically Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are two forms of cryptocurrencies, as not securities, as commodities. They haven't really been vocal about other cryptocurrencies, so we don't know how they might fall on that. However, they have explicitly stated that Bitcoin and Ethereum are not securities and they are commodities. So the value that's associated with different types of cryptocurrencies are based by these market forces differently than, like I previously mentioned, fiat currency, which we're most used to in terms of the US dollar and coins. It's not regulated or it is not backed by any government or bank system, which means that it's harder to counterfeit. So in fiat currency, you have the ability to do lots of counterfeiting, as we've seen over the years, by just producing counterfeit dollars. Cryptocurrencies aren't able to be done that way. There is ways of fraud and different counterfeit problems. However, it's not as easy as you would to have in a fiat currency. In terms of how cryptocurrency is being used globally, you have a wide spectrum. Right, you have on one side of the spectrum, you have El Salvador, who allows Bitcoin as a legal tender, right, in their money transactions. So they can use it just as they would use their currency of their country. On the other side of the spectrum, you have China, who's completely banned cryptocurrency. So there's definitely lots of variations in between. Here in the US, it's not currently used as a digital currency. However, it is used more in an investment form. And it's ultimately disrupting and revolutionizing a lot of the financial infrastructures that we have in place and seen as an investment. So just to kind of recap a little bit, again, there's no intrinsic value. It can't be redeemed for other commodities like mostly what we know of as gold. There's no physical form. It exists only in the network. And again, it's not backed by any central authority. So it's completely decentralized. So where would you store the cryptocurrency? That's where you would store it would be in a digital wallet. This digital wallet is a software program that interacts with the blockchain. And its sole purpose is to store the cryptocurrency. There are different identification IDs that you will have as part of this wallet to be able to separate your cryptocurrency from another cryptocurrency on the blockchain. There's two different types of keys that you will have, a private key and a public key. Both of the keys are alphanumeric characters, and they help to keep the cryptocurrency secure in the digital ecosystem. The private key is a key that only will be attached to you as an individual or an organization, and the public key is a key that will be used to make transactions on the blockchain, and it's used to verify where the cryptocurrency is going to be deposited and transferred through. So let's talk a little bit about what that blockchain looks like, right? So we talked about cryptocurrency, which is stored in a digital wallet, and then we're now talking about how that's going to look like in terms of this digital ecosystem where transactions are happening, and that's what we call the blockchain. So the blockchain is a collection of data, which we know most commonly as a database. But this collection of data is saved on a variety of different computers in an electronic format that's worldwide, right? So that ability of having all of that information accessible all across the world through access from computers prevents the copies and the double spending like you have in fiat currency. And so in order for this blockchain to exist, you want to think of it like a digital checkbook, right? This distributed ledger that records all of these transactions in these codes, and it allows for consensus to happen. So these transactions are recorded in blocks, and then those blocks are linked together to create a chain, which all of those blockchains have to be verified as one unified transaction record that everyone has an access to. So I've broken down the steps of how this blockchain works in 7 different steps, right? So first, someone's going to request a transaction. When that transaction is requested, then it's broadcasted to the peer-to-peer network consisting of computers. Those computers are called nodes. And then once that transaction has been broadcasted, there's a verification process. Those computers work together in the ecosystem to validate that transaction and the user status, to identify who the person is, as well as to validate that the transaction is actually happening. In order for that transaction to exist on the blockchain, it has to be verified, which is step number 4. Once the transaction has been verified, then it can be added with the others to create a new block on the blockchain that adds to the other data of the ledger. So again, it's transactions that create blocks that then get added to the blockchain. And that new blockchain is then added to the blockchain, and it can't be changed. Once it's out there, it cannot be edited, it cannot be altered. The only way to add information to the blockchain would be to do another transaction. And then the last step is that the transaction is complete. Once the block has been added to the blockchain, it has been completed. So, CEO and co-founder of an African cryptocurrency exchange, Quadax, Gucci Okoro, has said to think about a blockchain in this way. Imagine a book where you write down everything you spend money on each day. Each page is similar to a block, and the entire book, a group of pages, is a blockchain. So you want to think about it in that kind of order in terms of how transactions end up on the blockchain that exists of cryptocurrency. So talking a little bit more about that verification process in order for those transactions to end up on the blockchain, you have 2 different types of verification processes. You have a proof of work and you have a proof of stake. And different cryptocurrencies will use different verification processes. So the proof of work is most common in Bitcoin, and the proof of stake is most common in Cardano. There's other examples that use these different types of verifications, but for the purposes of our discussion today, those are the two most common that you will see in terms of using each of these verification processes. So proof of work is going to be what's called a race to solve the blockchain puzzles. There's going to be a variety of different algorithms that you have to solve in order to verify that this transaction is actually authentic in order for it to be added to the blockchain. So that it's like a first to achieve the solving of the puzzle of those algorithms. And whoever does it first successfully, then will receive what's called a block reward. And that's a version of cryptocurrency that then is that version that gets added to the blockchain in addition to the transaction that has just been verified. And so one of the biggest issues with the proof of work system as a verification system is the fact that it consumes a lot of energy. Currently, it's about 0.21% of the world's energy that's going to this verification process. And that, in perspective, is about the same amount of energy that is being used in the entire country of Switzerland. So there's going to be a lot of issues going forward in terms of energy consumption for the proof of work verification system, but currently it's just used as a system to verify in order for transactions to end up on the blockchain. The other version of the verification system is proof of stake, and that's most commonly thought of as a bank collateral system, right? So think about when you go to get a loan, you put up collateral that the bank uses in order to verify. Right? And so these number of transactions that are used in this way, using proof of stake, they put up the collateral of current existing cryptocurrency that's already on the blockchain as a stake. And that then is held until the actual transaction can be verified. There's only a limited amount of cryptocurrency to be able to be put up stake, which will be temporarily locked up until the validation process happens. And then if it's incorrect, that stake of cryptocurrency that was put up is then forfeited. So they lose that cryptocurrency. So that is in place in order to discourage fraud. So then each verified transaction must still be checked and approved by the majority of ledger holders, which ultimately is to prevent fraud. So this entire verification process can take about 10 minutes all the way up to 2 hours, which is still faster than, again, other currency forms, but for the purposes of these two verification systems, it can be quite a laborious process depending on which verification system is used for the cryptocurrency. So some negatives of crypto is that it's volatile. Think of it like an EKG, right? Your heart rate's going up and down and it's fluctuating just the same as how much crypto is fluctuating throughout the time that it's been in existence. Another negative is that there is a digital trail. Oftentimes people think that there is not, and therefore that's the problem as to why government agencies haven't been as active in regulating it, but that's not the case. There is that verification process that we just walked through is creating a digital trail that government agencies will be able to track all of the financial transactions that are existing on the blockchain. And then lastly, the environmental impact. As we talked about in one of the last verification systems, there's a lot of energy consumption that's going into play in terms of verifying transactions that will exist on the blockchain. Going forward, we aren't talking about NFTs today, but I didn't want to not mention them at all. It's completely different than cryptocurrencies, and it's not to be mistaken with the process that we just went through in terms of how cryptocurrencies are stored and how they ultimately end up on the blockchain. But non-fungible tokens, NFTs, are what we consider to be something that is completely different because of the fact that it is a one-of-a-kind asset. Cryptocurrencies is a medium of exchange, and non-fungible tokens is a representation of an asset that can't be replaced by anything else. So it is going to take shape in the form of a token, and what you do to purchase that token, it's purchased on an online marketplace, which has a digital certificate of ownership. And so it would be seen as an asset that you will think will gain value over time. And so some examples of NFTs that you want to make sure that you're aware of is Coca-Cola sold an NFT of loot boxes, which is this top picture on the right here, donating more than $575,000 to the Special Olympics. And then on the bottom right, you see there's an NFT of the Twitter CEO, Jack Dorsey, his first tweet back in 2006, when he first was setting up Twitter, which sold for $2.9 million. And when it sold for that $2.9 million, it was immediately converted to Bitcoin, and then it was donated to Give Directly, which is an organization fighting poverty in Africa. And so NFTs can be used concurrently with cryptocurrency, but they are not to be mistaken for it to be the same thing. So just be careful and mindful in transactions of how you receive it, and different structures and strategies that are in place in order for those transfers and donations to happen. So if someone is on the board of an organization, here are some things that they should be keeping in mind of questions that they want to make sure are forefront. First is going to be, how will extreme changes in valuations impact the organization? Right, so thinking through if that, remember that volatility that I was mentioning about cryptocurrency, how will those changes in the value of the cryptocurrency that you will be on the receiving end impact the organization? And keeping in mind those fiduciary duties. Second question is, how will the organization monitor emerging legal and regulatory considerations, right? So thinking through, what is that going to look like? What are the current regulations in place? What are the current legal systems in place that the organization needs to be mindful of? Third question is the organization aware of the tax framework and implications, right? Even though you might be a tax-exempt organization, you want to make sure both on the receiving end and in the transactions of donors that you are mindful of what the tax framework and implications look like. And then lastly, how will the organization manage security concerns regarding crypto donations, right? Being on the receiving end of cryptocurrencies, there's a lot of security concerns that need to be addressed. And what is the organization's current security system in place that will it be able to sustain receiving cryptocurrency? With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to May Harris.
Hi, thank you, Jade. Welcome everyone to this awesome webinar, and my mind and brain is spinning, and I'm sure everyone else's is as well. 15 minutes to get a full in-depth look at what cryptocurrency is a lot to ask, but I think Jade did a fantastic job. So we're going to start by really, why should a nonprofit accept cryptocurrency? I think you went one too far, Jade. There we go. Okay, well, I would say one of the primary reasons that a nonprofit organization should start considering accepting cryptocurrency is because it is becoming more mainstream. As confusing as it is, as mind-spinning and boggling as it is, it's becoming much more mainstream. It's especially with traditional investors and banks. For example, Tesla purchased $1.5 billion of Bitcoin. Tesla's biggest and most famous investor, Elon Musk, he just had to say something about Dogecoin and it took off. PayPal and Square have both launched features allowing their merchants to accept payments in crypto. And again, two major banks, Bank of New York Mellon and Morgan Stanley, have announced crypto investment products. So as it becomes more mainstream, it becomes more acceptable for nonprofits to start accepting donations in crypto, and easier. That doesn't mean it's easy yet. We'll go through that a little bit more in some of these next slides. But go ahead, next slide, Jade. Another reason is that there are billions of dollars, well, not dollars, billions of coins available worth billions of dollars. 21 million, or 14% of all US adults, hold crypto, of which over 70% are relatively young. And they're also very philanthropic. According to several reports that I read, they're up to 14% more philanthropic than the generation before them. So 26% of crypto holders purchased their first crypto assets within the last year, vastly and quickly growing. And a remaining 66% of US adults are crypto curious, meaning they might invest in crypto soon. So I don't know how many of you, I wish we could have a hand raise here, have a virtual wallet, hold cryptocurrency, and I bet it would be a majority of us. finally, 12 people. Yeah, there we go. I see, I see the hands. 12 people on the Forbes billionaire list made much of their fortunes in crypto, and over 100,000 Bitcoin millionaires. And that's just Bitcoin, right? So there is a vast, a vast growing amount of available assets and potential donations available to nonprofit organizations. So thanks for moving that. If you look, the market capitalization as of the 2nd of January of this year is over $1 trillion. And then if you look at the next one, Jade, the fact that it got to that valuation over $1 trillion market capitalization, they did it in 12 years. It's gone incredibly fast. It's growing incredibly quickly, but it's now time for nonprofits to kind of pay attention. And I think in the past, organizations, if it's not cash, a lot of times they don't even want to touch it. Sometimes, you have to brush up your gift acceptance policy, and who wants to do that for something that might be a fad? Another report that I read said up to 60% of individuals over the age of 40 believe that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is a fad. Well, I don't think it's a fad. Next slide. So billions in crypto have already been donated. So as Jade mentioned, Bitcoin kind of launched in 2008. Just, a short time later, 2019, 200 million, and these are in US dollars, were donated of cryptocurrency. In 2021, data indicates more than 1 billion was contributed. Now, I have to say one of those billions was in one fell swoop, one massive donation, but there were 300 million to Fidelity Charitable alone, which is accepting cryptocurrency. And so far this year, we have 54 million alone donated just to Ukrainian relief as of this month. So some of the big guys, American Red Cross, UNICEF, and Greenpeace are all now accepting crypto donations. And then according to Give Directly, crypto contributed significantly to their rising donation levels, basically helping them to triple in 1 year. Okay, so why hesitate? Well, there we go. It's perceived as extremely complex. And just from what Jade went through in the first 15 minutes of this webinar, it is pretty complex. It's not traditionally how most of us think of assets, as revenue, as gross receipts. And it's also perceived as risky and overly burdensome. So what are some of those risks? Well, crypto is volatile. Again, Jade mentioned this, but next slide, you can kind of see a little bit about the volatility. So you may recall that in early April 2021, the cryptocurrency market value hit 2 trillion. In less than a month, it was at 1 trillion. It lost half of its value in a month. It's incredible. If you look at it in comparison, so the yellow line right there is the S&P 500. Then we have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then I don't even know how to pronounce this. It's SPADE. I think it's SP8DE, which operates on the Ethereum platform, is also on there. You can see it's incredibly volatile. So, it's really fun if you're an investor and you've got $100 in it or something like that. But as a nonprofit organization, how does that fit within your investment policies, right? If you're going to be investing in this. So next slide. Second one, there's evolving regulation here. So these currencies, as Jade mentioned, are not issued or regulated by a central government, and they're outside the control of traditional financial institutions for the most part, except for those little dabblings that I've talked about. But that doesn't mean that regulators around the world aren't going to regulate. That just means that they haven't yet decided exactly how to deal with it. And thus there's a lot of gray areas. Even among institutions and brokerages, there are varying levels of risk tolerance. I think Fidelity Charitable accepts donations of maybe 3 types of those 18,000 different types of cryptocurrencies because of their varying risk tolerance. And, it specifically pertains to, privacy concerns, transparency, donor wishes for anonymity, etc. So your nonprofit and board may consider exercising fiduciary responsibilities quite difficult given the uncertainties, especially if you're holding on to the currencies as an asset and investing them. Okay, next slide, accounting guidelines. So the U.S. Financial Accounting Standards Board, so FASB, has yet to directly address cryptocurrency in GAAP, in generally accepted accounting procedures. Technically, crypto is considered an intangible asset, and GAAP doesn't permit fair value accounting for an intangible asset. So until the board issues guidance here, accounting for donated crypto directly can be quite a bit tricky. And kind of necessitates really two sets of books, which we typically advise strongly against, but in this case, I don't know how else you would go about it. Okay, the next one is the Internal Revenue Service. So I think Jade said, the SEC views this as a commodity. Well, and then the GAAP, they consider it an intangible asset. Well, the IRS treats cryptocurrency donations similar to property. So meaning that your written acknowledgement to the donor should be for an in-kind donation of a non-cash contribution. It's kind of similar to securities, which means completing the Schedule M on your Form 990 filing. And then the nonprofit charity will also need to complete and file the 8282 if they sell, exchange, or otherwise dispose of the crypto within 3 years of receiving it. I think most charities would be getting rid of the selling and converting to cash within 3 years. Very few are going to hold on to it for 3 years, and then of course with a copy to the donor. And then that slide. And as far as what needs to be provided to the donor by the charities is just a reminder. Well, the traditional contemporaneous written receipt, of course, that we're all familiar with, depending upon the value of the donation. And then the donor will need to complete Form 8283, and for donations worth greater than $5,000. That requires a certified appraisal and your organization's signature. Well, that becomes a little bit tricky. There aren't that many organizations or businesses out there that are doing these certified kind of appraisals for cryptocurrency. I think I checked about 3 months ago and I couldn't find one, and I did it again this morning in preparation for this webinar, and I found 2. So it's definitely an emerging market, but it still is not very traditional. How do you value blockchain and cryptocurrency? And then finally, a lot of donors, crypto donors, want to do it anonymously. Well, how does that impact your reporting? It's a lot still remains to be seen as far as the IRS is concerned. Okay, and then finally, everyone's going to need to look and update their gift acceptance policies, and in some cases, their investment policies to answer, will you accept donated crypto? If yes, well, what types? All types? Are you prepared to accept all types of donated cryptocurrency? How will you accept it? Will you immediately sell it? Will you hold it and invest it? And who's making that decision? All of these things are topics that should be addressed in a really good comprehensive gift acceptance policy. And then if you do hold, what are the guidelines you'll follow on when you would liquidate it, which could be different depending on the type of coin and its perceived stability. And then you'll need to update those policies at least annually. Guidance is coming out quite often, so you're going to have to keep a really close eye on this to ensure regulatory and IRS reporting compliance. Okay, so let's make the assumption that your board has decided that this is in the best interest of the organization to accept cryptocurrency. Well, you can do it in 2 ways, primarily, basically directly and indirectly. Directly is you can embed a crypto exchange directly on your website, accept it through there, and then decide if you're going to hold or sell. So this is for minimal fees. Crypto exchanges offer checkout experiences. They typically have a built-out donation process with an automatic conversion to cash. So not typically great for if you want to actually invest. But it's not created with nonprofits or donations in mind, or those reporting responsibilities that you have. Thus, your organization will still need to fill in with donor support, tax receipt creation, and collection of donor information. So you still have to have some boots on the ground to collect information here. The second is to use your own crypto wallets and receive donations without any intermediary. Now, this is the most time-intensive, kind of complex option here, but the way you do it, it's the most, given so many other options, your organization really should only consider this if you have a technical staff, full-time technical staff, who can weigh the different wallet options and keep track of these transactions and all the donor information and reporting you need to do. So examples of those are, Coinbase Wallet, Electrum, Mycelium, Trust Wallet, and there are many others. Okay, so if you choose this option, you should also create a workflow to collect that donor information if they'll give it to you, as transactions are typically anonymous in the blockchain. And you should create additional policies and procedures around accessing the wallet. So such as securely storing credentials like the seed phrase. Now, for those of you who raised your hand, when you set up a wallet, they gave you like those combinations of random words that they said, don't ever lose that. Well, how are you going to address that as a nonprofit organization? Who holds the seed phrase key to the kingdom here? Okay. Now, the second way to do it is indirectly. And this is through a separate 501c3 donation processor. And I've given you two examples here. So this is, these are 501c3 organizations who are set up basically just to do this, to do all of the paperwork for you, to do all of the compliance for you, and to take the risk, and then just pass it on in the form of a financial grant to your nonprofit. So they bear the burden of reporting. They bear the burden of ongoing compliance. And so I think it's most likely useful for smaller organizations who want to not count themselves out of this, opportunity, but don't have the capacity and the people to process all of these things. Okay, so I'm going to pass this on to Matt Learned and Carson Bacher. And then for those of you who have your hands up and there are questions, we absolutely will have time to address them at the end. Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matt Learned. I don't know if Carson Bacher will be able to join us. I will note as a good highlight of litigation that things come up and Carson had to step away for a deposition this afternoon. So if he interrupts me to take over for his portion, forgive us, but I'll just dive in. Again, my name is Matt Learned. I primarily work out of our litigation practice group, litigating a variety of disputes on behalf of our nonprofit clients. And courts are often the first place that parameters of a novel idea, such as cryptocurrency, are tested. Thus, we thought it was important for purposes of our discussion today to look at cryptocurrency litigation, especially through the lens of nonprofit governance. So with that in mind, the first question we wanted to answer is, have there been lawsuits about cryptocurrency? And if so, what are the nature of those disputes and what can those lawsuits teach us? The answer to the first question, whether there have been cryptocurrency related lawsuits, is clearly yes. There's been a handful, but they appear to be growing every year. We found this chart that you see informative on this point. The Securities and Exchange Commission, that's the SEC that was mentioned earlier, is the governmental body that enforces U.S. securities laws. Like the IRS, the SEC enforces the law using a variety of tools and enforcement mechanisms, including administrative proceedings and litigation. The SEC publishes data about its enforcement, which is where we get this chart. And this chart indicates how many cryptocurrency enforcement actions, including the filing of lawsuits, the SEC has taken over the last 9 years or so. As you can see, in 2013, there was only one cryptocurrency lawsuit filed by the SEC. In 2014, there were 0. But over the past 4 or 5 years, those numbers have been increasing every year. And by all accounts, these numbers are only going to rise. And though these numbers don't appear particularly large, keep in mind that a lawsuit is kind of like a cockroach. Just like for every cockroach you see, there's probably 100 that you don't see. So for every lawsuit that actually gets filed, you can rest assured that there are many more disputes that simply didn't result in a lawsuit. So the takeaway here is that cryptocurrency enforcement is on the rise and will almost certainly continue to be watched more and more closely as the government gets mechanisms in place to monitor the market and enforce its laws. If we can go on to the next slide. We found this chart interesting as well. It gives a picture of what types of enforcement actions and law violations the SEC is pursuing. As you can see, the vast majority of the actions relate to instances of suspected fraud in the offer and sale of cryptocurrency and unregistered sales offerings. These schemes often take the form much like Ponzi schemes, which are where investors try to get in on the quote ground floor, and instead invested Bitcoins are being used to pay existing investors and exchanged into US dollars to pay the organizer's personal expenses. So that's a lot of the schemes that the SEC is currently targeting. They've issued a number of investor alerts warning individuals to be wary of the promises of quick returns through the investment of money into cryptocurrency. Each one of these cases involves companies and individuals who attempt to take advantage of the excitement and the high returns surrounding cryptocurrency. The clear excitement and possibility of getting rich leads to greater risks for fraud and people getting taken advantage of. Just like in a lot of things, bad actors will find a way to profit. And so nonprofits should too exercise some caution when it comes to gifts, donations, and grants of digital currency. You go to the next slide. Enforcement agencies can't be everywhere at once, but as you can see here, cryptocurrency enforcement efforts have primarily been focused in New York, with 50% of the enforcement actions nationwide, and California is in second place with nearly 20% of the enforcement actions during the period of 2013 through 2021. So we go to the next slide. So these numbers tell us that the government is increasing its effort to monitor and enforce the law in the cryptocurrency market, and will almost certainly continue to do so in the years ahead. The SEC and Department of Justice, the DOJ is the chief enforcer of our federal laws, are growing increasingly comfortable working together to use traditional enforcement tools in the cryptocurrency arena. So there will likely be an increase in these joint enforcement actions going forward. And it appears in California, New York, they're the most closely watched markets, such that practitioners in these states are more likely than other jurisdictions to be subject to an enforcement action. So we should keep that in mind as well. We did want to highlight a few cases in particular involving the SEC and IRS. So the first case, it's, I'm going to butcher this name, I'm sure, Zaitsky versus the United States. And this is an example of the risks of amending your tax return and why you want to get it right the first time and not send up any red flags for either the SEC or the IRS. In this case, Mr. Zaitsky and his wife filed a joint return in 2016. All of us have to do, just like everyone, and his wife and Mr. Zaitsky listed their various income and assets in order to calculate their tax liability. Included in their original return was proceeds of 7 Bitcoin transactions, which resulted in a final tax liability of around $37,000. A few months later, Mr. Zaitsky and his wife filed an amended return for reasons we don't know, but they removed 2 of the 7 Bitcoin sales proceeds, which reduced their liability down to $21,000, about $16,000 less than what they would have had to pay based on their original return. Of course, this sent up red flags. The IRS got interested and began looking into it, opened an investigation. And the IRS, through these enforcement mechanisms, have a lot of tools in their arsenal to use in regards to getting information that they need, similar to civil discovery tools. So what they did is they sought a subpoena that would allow the IRS to look into the entirety of Mr. Zaitsky's Bitcoin account, essentially to look at all the transactions he's made. Who knows what information that would have recovered or revealed to the IRS. But what he did was he filed a motion to quash, which is just a fancy way of saying he was trying to get the court to cancel the subpoena and not allow the IRS to act on the subpoena and ask the court to intervene. He raised a number of concerns, mostly including privacy issues, but the court said, nope. The IRS has the right to look at Mr. Zaitsky's entire Bitcoin account. And the legal test is really is the IRS requesting information for a legitimate purpose, and if the requested information is relevant to that investigative purpose. And the the court found that yes, the IRS was pursuing this information for a legitimate purpose, and what they were asking for was relevant to that purpose. So the court, in essence, rejected the privacy arguments that Mr. Zeitsky and his wife were making. And the IRS had broad discovery rights, including access to the entire cryptocurrency reciprocities. So the real takeaway, get your tax return filed right the first time. We go to the next slide. So another case is the Strashny case. And this is a good example of the way the IRS views cryptocurrency with regards to paying off tax liabilities. So in this case, Mr. and Mrs. Strashny failed to pay their 2017 tax liability. So as the IRS does, it sought to collect. As part of that process, the Strashnys wanted to enter into an installment agreement with the IRS, essentially saying, we'll pay this, we just need more time to do so, let's pay it over time. The IRS administrator in charge of that process caught wind of the Strashnys' 2018 tax return, which showed significant assets in the form of cryptocurrency, which had they just been upfront, it would have been clear that they had the funds available to pay off their entire tax liability from 2017 all at once, and they didn't need this payment plan. Those cryptocurrency assets were over 7 million, and the 2018 tax return indicated that they were making monthly withdrawals of $19,000 from the cryptocurrency account. So, rightfully so, the administrator denied the request for the installment agreement, and the IRS sought to forcibly seize the Strashnys' cryptocurrency assets. The Strashnys appealed, complaining that they were wrongfully denied the installment agreement, and the U.S. tax court again said, nope, the IRS was within its rights to seize the Strashnys' cryptocurrency assets. So, takeaway, cryptocurrency is just like any other property that is subject to seizure. But the real takeaway is pay close attention to what you are saying on one tax return when you're fighting with the IRS about another tax return. You want everything to speak with each other and not contradict, not file contradictory documents that will, again, just send up red flags. So those are some of the SEC enforcement or tax-related issues, but I wanted to touch briefly on other bases for cryptocurrency litigation. And these could include contractual disputes, issues involving fiduciary duty of board members, privacy, transparency, and fraud concerns. We go the other way? Okay, next, there we go. So regarding contractual disputes, these are really smart contracts, and where these were first designed to be used concurrently with digital currencies and are simply programs stored on a blockchain that May and Jade were talking about earlier that run when predetermined conditions are met. They may sound complicated, but the general concept is based on simple if-then logic. So for example, if you send me the autographed Beatles Rubber Soul record, then the sum of X amount in cryptocurrency will be transferred to you. That's probably an oversimplification, but general idea is that these are automatic contractual agreements that are triggered once these conditions are met. Now, the execution of these smart contracts is typically automated. So as I was just saying, that there is not signatures, they're self-executing once these conditions are met. And when I've been in depositions involving contractual disputes before, inevitably, one of the first questions being asked of the person deposed is that your signature on this contract? Did you understand the importance of this contract when you were signing it, etc.? For there to be an enforceable contract, you generally have an offer, acceptance, consideration. Stated differently, there has to be a meeting of the minds between the parties as to what they are agreeing to do and for how much. However, since the execution of these smart contracts is automated, it may raise issues over whether there was a valid offer and acceptance of the contract, thus creating enforceability issues. Now, although I haven't seen this specific issue played out in any court proceedings, it's inevitable that it's going to happen at some point, most likely in the near future. We go to the next slide. In my experience litigating on behalf of nonprofits, a lot of the issues often involve claims that the board breached the fiduciary duty. Now, what does it mean to say that a board member has a fiduciary duty or owes a fiduciary duty to the organization? There are primarily 4 fiduciary duties owed by a nonprofit board member. Those are the duty of care, the duty of inquiry, duty of loyalty, and duty to follow investment standards. Duty of care simply means that a director will perform his or her duties in good faith and in a manner the director believes is in the best interest of the organization. The duty of inquiry simply means that if the director is put on notice of any suspicious circumstances, they may be required to make such reasonable inquiry as an ordinarily prudent person would make under similar circumstances. So that just means that a director must investigate potential problems if they learn about them. Duty of loyalty is simply that the director puts the organization's interest first, and the duty to follow investment standards means the director's fiduciary duties apply to overseeing the investment assets held in charitable trust. So due to the volatile nature of cryptocurrency, a director's decision of if and how long to hold on to cryptocurrency could come under scrutiny for breaching the fiduciary duties owed to the organization. So for example, the volatility, it may this week be worth $50,000, but they decide to hold on to it one more week to see if they can potentially cash in a little bit more, and then the price plummets. So those could be potential concerns regarding a board member's fiduciary duty. Additionally, the mining process, the cryptocurrency mining process, has drawn extreme criticism due to its environmental impact. Generally, cryptocurrency mining is the process by which new, quote, coins are entered into circulation. The energy use and carbon footprints of blockchain networks are massive. Bitcoin, for example, uses 91 terawatt hours of electricity annually. That's more annual electricity than all of Finland, which is a country of 5.5 million. That's about the same amount of electricity consumed by the entire state of Washington each year, and a third of electricity used for all residential cooling in the US annually. And more than 7 times as much electricity used by all of Google's global operations. So a lot of energy is needed to operate the cryptocurrency market. So let's say you work with a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating climate change, and the board has decided to accept donations in the form of cryptocurrency. There may be an argument that directors have breached their fiduciary duties by accepting cryptocurrency simply because it's misaligned with the purpose of the organization, offsetting the environmental impact of such technology. The organization not practicing what it preaches, so to speak. So these are just some hypotheticals. Again, I have not seen these play out in the real world, but I think they are real possible scenarios that could be coming down the pike as we see more cryptocurrency litigation, especially in the nonprofit sector. The ability to operate anonymously is a central tenet of cryptocurrency technology. That can also, unfortunately, present problems, as it may make it more difficult to enforce data theft laws. In addition, federal and state data and privacy and cybersecurity laws do not address some of the unique concerns with blockchain technology. The anonymity of certain cryptocurrency transactions makes them susceptible to use by bad actors involved in criminal activity. And the privacy of these transactions make it difficult to recover funds or for law enforcement to hold individuals criminally responsible. For example, in late 2020, a group known as DarkSide extorted millions of dollars using cyber attacks and ransomware. They subsequently donated $10,000 in Bitcoin to Save the Children and the Water Project, leaving the organizations with a complicated legal and moral dilemma. Do they keep these funds despite their source? The Water Project ultimately made no comment, while Save the Children announced that it would not keep the funds donated by the hackers. Now, I'm by no means trying to say that this is the normal cryptocurrency donation scenario. It's just a reminder for nonprofits to be mindful if they decide to accept donations in the form of cryptocurrency, that all compliance laws still apply to the crypto, and the federal government still has jurisdiction over activities involving a cryptocurrency. Another issue with the anonymity is that since the donations can be anonymous, you may not be able to identify who the donor is. Now, if you don't know who the donor is, you can't follow up with him or her for potential future donations and ongoing sources of funding. So in these cases, you can avoid these problems by having donors fill out a form with their contact information when making a crypto gift. And when you give people a reason for something, such as providing their contact information, they're frequently more motivated to do it. So on your form, you could say, will you make the work of our organization easier by letting us know who you are? Anonymous gifts may be less helpful. We may not be able to provide a tax receipt. So things like that can incentivize people to offer that information, so it's an ongoing resource of funds for the organization. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Matt.
That was great. We will go ahead and see if we have questions at this point. The only question that I'm seeing is, will the participants be emailed the slides? And that is something that we can make available and send out after the presentation. Right. I'm seeing some thank yous for the information, but not any questions.
Well, let me just also add, you have our emails now, you have our telephone numbers. If you have any, follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Okay, David, I see a hand up. You want to talk, David?
I just had a practical question. May, what you're saying, in effect, is that many of the issues are avoided if you use one of, I think you call it a direct or indirect provider like every.org. And I guess I learned a long time ago, nothing's for free. And I see every does not charge for the conversion. And I've seen Coinbase at 1%, and there's something called Free Will, I think, is taking 10%. So there's a wide range here, and I guess you kind of get what you pay for. Any comments or thought process on that? And then secondly, I guess my question is, are they making money on the spread, the bid and ask on the currency? So if I have them, if someone donates, they sell it, they convert it right away, send it to the organization in dollars.
Mm-hmm.
How do they make money?
Well, they're not in the business of making money. They are a 501c3. It surprised me as well, David, that every.org doesn't charge for anything. So I actually don't know. In preparation for this webinar, I found them, and I found the other one, the Giving Block. And I actually am going to reach out to them. I want to know how they're doing this, what's in it for them, so to speak, other than the fact that they're a 501c3. But yeah, Coinbase takes 1%. And I think maybe this is just a good opportunity to shop around and make sure that you get the best deal. But I also think they do, and even if look at it kind of like a fiscal sponsorship, right? They're doing a huge amount of admin that you don't have to hire someone to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. But here's an interesting fact. I went on their website and I put in the name of 2 nonprofits that I work with. They put up a button immediately, give to XYZ organization, without even asking permission. So it's happening out there in both nonprofits. There were buttons. If you were a certified 501c3, someone can send Bitcoin to our organization, no questions asked. We would just get a check for dollars.
Do you know what's kind of interesting is that it'll be interesting to see how the California Attorney General regulates this. My guess is that they'll be just like any other fundraising platform that just, under AB 488 that's rolling out next year. I bet these guys are going to have to register for that. And you can't now, under that AB 488, these platforms can raise on behalf of nonprofits that have not given them consent to do so. So very interesting. Absolutely. Okay, Javier, let's go with you.
Hi, thank you. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone who presented, this information. As much of us can agree, is extremely useful in today's environment. And my question, revolves around, nonprofits, like raising money through crypto, right? why exactly like would a nonprofit choose to do so, especially given in today's environment, taking into account not only like volatility, but also like the whole like war that's going on abroad, and all those other factors. Like why would a nonprofit want to do that like right now?
Well, there are a lot of crypto donors. That's a great reason why. So in my presentation, I think you might have seen 54 million went, you mentioned the Ukrainian war, 54 million just this year in crypto donations has gone forth, you know, for projects surrounding Ukrainian support. Granted, they're probably immediately converted into cash and distributed in grants to organizations on the ground. So I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. You should be still charitably soliciting, whether it's in the form of fiat currency, normal currency, or in cryptocurrency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, the main question said was like my main concern was, are those funds like liquid or illiquid? And you mentioned they get turned into cash right off the bat. So, okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
They can be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
I think the point is just to not cut off that pool of investors, to be knowledgeable that that large pool exists, and to not alienate yourself from that pool, but just still be cautious and have clear policies and procedures in place should you decide to start accepting those donations.
Well, and to Matt's point, there's a difference between accepting and then holding and investing, right? So you can accept it immediately, change it to cash, and that's the easiest way to do it, right? But if you actually want to hold it, it's a little different. And right now, if you are capacity strapped and don't have a lot of people on the ground that can do that, I wouldn't do it, the do-it-yourself mechanism. So good point there. Okay, Abby.
There's a lot of comments to that in the chat in terms of there being a lot more risk if an organization was to not convert it and to hold it, in terms of different concerns that we talked about in the presentation. So I think we have Abby. Did you want to ask the question?
Yeah, so just a little clarification. I actually have sat in on one of the every.org presentations, and I do recommend, if anybody's interested, to definitely, follow up. You have to claim, my understanding is you have to claim, like the gentleman was saying, there's a button available to donate, but you actually have to claim and put in your banking information, I believe, before any kind of transaction or transfer can happen, because otherwise I don't know what they would do with that money. But what would be an interesting maybe follow-up session would be, because I think a lot of us are in the same boat where it's that indirect, somebody's a middleman selling it right away, turning it into currency and providing it to the organization for a lot of the smaller ones, that it would be great to have both Giving Block and every.org maybe on a webinar to just hear the comparisons, because I think I've seen a lot of really big nonprofits out there picking up on Giving Block. And I've seen them also, they pick up on all of them. Obviously, they have tech support to do that. But it'd be really helpful to know, because it seems like Giving Block, there's a lot more that's transferred back in terms of responsibility to the organizations for some of the transactions and other things. So anyway, there's a lot of subtleties, but I think giving people the option that deal a lot in cryptocurrency is definitely something the nonprofits should seriously consider in light of all the other things obviously you guys have shared.
Absolutely. I also see Sarah posted that free will is another option for accepting crypto from a middleman company. So we'll add that to the list. There's one more. Okay. Any other questions before we're done? It looks like we, in respect for your time, we're right there. Okay.
Okay, well, with that, we would like to thank again USD, the School of Leadership and Education Sciences, for partnering with us and hosting this webinar. And thank you all for being in attendance. Again, our contact information is on the screen, and we will also be sending out the slides to the attendees after the presentation. So thank you so much for attending.